Surely you've watched anime in your life, but why do people get addicted to it? Why are their communities so strange? Why does it include so much filth and 18 content? How did it spread everywhere in the world so quickly? Does this thing affect your life? And the most important question among them, why do anime characters look so different from Japanese people? And the real reason behind this, which you might not expect, is that anime was Japan's way of cleansing its history. Hey guys, how are you? How's everything? Yes, I believe most of you have watched anime at some point in your life, whether intentionally or unintentionally. Personally, when I was young, I used to watch a lot of anime, and today, I want to answer all of them. There is a lot of filth spreading around, and the anime community is strange. I'm talking from the perspective of someone who used to watch it a lot. There are people who isolate themselves from the world, people who worship fictional characters, people who marry anime characters, and people who commit crimes because of anime. How is it that this thing affects the world to such an extent? It seems like a minor issue, but it's not. This is a whole world, and today you will understand it from A to Z. But before that, I want to answer one question that you might be wondering about right now. A research paper was done in Saudi Arabia in 2021, and it states that people of all age groups who watch anime are smarter than those who don't. So if you ever thought that these people are stupid or less valuable, the fact is that anime watchers are smarter than regular people. There's a very logical reason for this, and if you continue with me, you'll understand. So, there's something I need to explain quickly. You have manga and you have anime. Manga is like comics, and anime is like cartoons. For some reason, if you tell anyone who watches anime that they're watching cartoons, they get angry, even though it's essentially the same thing. The original manga started in the 12th century, which is very old and began in Japan. It wasn't popular at all back then. But let's fast forward a lot to the Sakoku period, or the Edo period. What is Sakoku? It was a period between 1603 and 168 where Japan was completely isolated from the outside world. No foreigner was allowed to enter Japan. It was a total isolation. So, think of it from the country's perspective. It wasn't exposed to any foreign cultures at all. This period was important for Japan because they developed a very deep culture during it. I think everyone in the world knows how significant Japanese culture is. Really, how does one determine whether a culture is significant or not? The important thing is that they had a highly cultured society with a rich heritage that had not been exposed to the world and was not influenced by anything. During this period of isolation, Japanese art evolved significantly and became very different from any other art form because it was isolated. So, in 1868, when the Sakoku period of isolation ended, the whole world discovered Japanese culture for the first time, and everyone was intrigued by something entirely new. On the other hand, the Japanese were also very interested in Western and American culture. This is when they began adopting the Western style in comics, the square panels with events happening inside. Manga transformed from simple drawings to the panel format we are familiar with today, and manga art continued to develop until 1928. The father of manga was born. His name was Tezuka. The name is quite difficult, so we decided to call him Jack. I've altered Japanese history completely. Anyway, what did Jack do? He was born around the time Disney began in America. That year, Disney started making animated films featuring Mickey Mouse, which shows a huge difference between Japan and America at that time. This guy made a radical change in the type of stories that appeared in manga and animation. Suddenly, characters' eyes became larger. Their noses smaller. This is how we got the anime characters we know today, with huge eyes and a very cute appearance. Here's a question. Why did this guy make characters like this? He wanted Japanese characters to have features that somewhat reflect Japan's small eyes, a calm demeanor, small bodies, and dark hair. So why did manga characters suddenly have big eyes, light hair, and a lively personality? Honestly, I used to think it was a kind of inferiority. Complex Japanese people were unhappy with their small eyes, their calm nature, etc., and wanted their art to reflect the opposite. That's why the eyes became unrealistically large. But it's much simpler than that. Tezuka was heavily influenced by Americans. If you look at Mickey Mouse, you'll understand why Japanese animation adopted this style. The inferiority complex might be correct, but we'll discuss that in more detail later. Alright, as I told you, Disney was setting the world on fire with their drawings and animations. Japan's first animation came out in 1917, but it wasn't as powerful because they didn't have the resources. Meanwhile, Disney had a lot of money and could discover new things in animation. But everything was about to stop soon because subscribe and like the video now. But everything was about to stop for another reason: the Second World War. In 1941, America declared war on Japan. You might expect that art would stop because the country was at war, but no, we are talking politics here. Japan started using anime and manga to spread propaganda, whether false news or showing that America was losing or weak, or to show that the Japanese soldier was very strong. America was doing the same thing to the extent that there were Mickey Mouse episodes that clearly talked about Japan. It was propaganda. They started fighting each other through art. Now, I want to throw you a question before we continue. When I mention Germany, what comes to mind? Their war crimes, right? Their strange history. When I mention Japan, what do you think of? Sushi, anime, manga, anime statues everywhere, cute anime conventions. The country is kawaii. Do you think this happened by accident? Do you really think this happened by accident? Okay, I'll continue with this point in a bit because it's not simple at all and it changes everything. But the important thing is the Second World War. In 1945, Hiroshima and the atomic bomb dropped on Japan, and as you all know, their lives changed forever. The Japanese people lost many lives. Their psyche was not okay. Moreover, American soldiers stayed in Japan for 7 years because they won the war. What did the American soldiers do? They had comics like Batman and Superman to read. Now, the Japanese looked at this and said, "We want something like this. We want to create comics like this." So, Tezuka created a character named Adam, or Astro Boy if you remember. He invented Adam, and if you look at Adam and compare him to Mickey Mouse, you'll notice similarities between them. As I mentioned, Tezuka was inspired by Disney and wanted to create characters with big eyes and no sharp angles. But why did he create Adam? The people in Japan had lost many lives. Children lost their parents, everyone was upset. People were coming out of a war, and keep in mind when I say a child lost his parents and came out of a war, he became very aware. So, Tezuka had to present a character that would resonate with the minds of these people, a superhero child who wants to spread peace around the world. They started making manga, and as you might expect, Tezuka was very frustrated that Disney was making animated films while he wanted to make animated films too. Then television started to spread, and a TV channel called Fuji approached him and said they would make it into an animation. So Astro Boy became an anime, and Tezuka's goal was to spread it around the world, specifically to America. They showed the program on an American channel, but it was rejected because it was considered too violent. There were characters dying, which was something never seen on American television. To give you an example, imagine Timon and Pumbaa or Ariel from The Little Mermaid or Mickey Mouse. This was new to Americans. At that time, Americans were still at a low level of awareness, having never been exposed to war. So, they started to clean up the anime for American audiences, meaning if someone died, they would say they fainted instead. I think you understand this is a very big story in anime, a young character saving the world. And now, as I mentioned, anime started to spread in America. The success brought in money, allowing them to create more, and from there, the anime world exploded. Many new shows began to emerge and spread everywhere. Dubbing began, including shows like Grandizer that your dad and my dad used to watch. The dubbing spread everywhere, and what set anime apart from everything else was that it had a serialized story that continued across episodes. So if I watched an episode today and skipped 5, I wouldn't understand the story, which makes me more interested in the plot. Another reason was that Japanese animators didn't have the money that Disney had, so they resorted to techniques like zooming and animation tricks to reduce costs. These factors distinguished anime, and the strong storytelling is a significant aspect. If you've ever watched anime, you know that its storylines are strong with character development, creating compelling stories. This is because anime is aimed at audiences who cannot just be given something like Timon and Pumbaa or Sleeping Beauty. Such things don't work for them. Now, there's something very important to understand about what I'm about to say and what I said before. There is the history written by Japan about itself, and there is the history written by the world about Japan. Usually, people take the history written by the country that won the war, not the history of the defeated country. So, you might find differences in sources here and there, but they all lead to the same thing. I want to explain a few things that will answer most of your questions about why anime takes on a Western style, why there are 18 elements, and other things that seem strange about anime. You'll understand this better if you remember when I asked you about Germany and you said you mostly think of their war crimes. Japan's history is also stained with blood due to their actions in World War II in various Asian countries like the Philippines, China, and Vietnam, horrible crimes. Now, keep in mind that Japanese culture, in terms of relationships and social norms, is generally not open-minded. So, when I talk about war crimes in China, you should imagine the extremely gruesome acts they committed. The world knows what Japan did in those countries, and the world will not forget unless something is done. This is where the concept of soft power comes into play. Soft power is the idea that the best propaganda is not to do propaganda. To explain it simply, soft power is about using your country's heritage to show the world that your country's culture is worth liking, to make people forget other negative things they might know about it. For example, the US does this a lot. You notice that American movies often portray America as the hero. This changes the world's perception of the country and makes people forget about past issues. In the 1990s, Japan experienced what is known as the Lost Decade, a severe economic collapse. Japan needed a strong source of income, so it created something called the Wonderful Japan Fund. They started funding anime studios to help anime develop and spread further, making Japan appear as a beautiful country and promoting its culture. One of the ways they did this was by integrating Western culture into animation. For example, there is a large amount of anime inspired by European stories, such as books and novels, which are adapted into anime set in European or American locations. Through this anime, Japanese culture, including their food and other aspects of their heritage, is presented. Anime became a tool for marketing Japan. Since they were targeting a global audience, the Japanese people, who are usually conservative about their culture, values, and ethics, allowed more freedom in content. For instance, relationships between characters of different genders, or same-sex relationships, which might have been opposed domestically, were allowed. They thought, since we're targeting a global audience and the locations in this anime are not set in Japan but elsewhere, we can do what we want and present it more openly in the anime. Topics related to young characters or school-aged characters and similar content became popular. This type of content was permitted because they were targeting a global audience, giving creators freedom to write about these subjects. Moreover, according to a Japanese professor named Antonio Levi, young men usually watch anime more than women, and anime tends to attract males more. To appeal to this global demographic, more content aimed at viewers over 18 was added. This often includes fan service, where female characters are portrayed in a way that attracts male viewers, providing a boost of dopamine through visual appeal. Additionally, in many anime, female characters are typically portrayed in supportive roles to male characters or serving their interests, which is not always the case but is common. For example, in Attack on Titan, some female characters have important roles, but this is not the norm. These trends, including content for audiences over 18, have led to a significant shift in anime, where this type of content has become a central element. Overall, the freedom to explore these topics in anime is partially due to the personal interests of creators, who may lack outlets for these subjects in their personal lives, driving them to write about these topics in their works. I have an opinion about something called the Pareto principle in statistics. It says that 80% of the results come from 20% of the causes. The 20% of the causes could be, for example, a bit of lack of transparency, which led to something much larger than anticipated, like a snowball effect. Initially, it was a small issue with the goal, but suddenly it grew into something much bigger. This also applies to strange religious ideas, where you might see anime with elements of Buddhism or Hinduism, or even extreme ideas. These elements are often avoided in anime because people don't take them as seriously as Hollywood movies. In Hollywood, if a film includes heretical ideas, people believe it influences minds, whereas with cartoons, it's not seen as impactful. Now, why do some people worship anime? I mean worship in the sense that they exaggerate their love for anime, similar to how some people feel about K-pop or soccer. If you criticize anime, you might face backlash for a long time. Why are there so many gatherings and conventions for anime fans? There's a syndrome called 8th grade syndrome, prevalent among children who watch a lot of anime. They feel like they are special or have superpowers. There are even criminals emerging from this community. Why does it seem this way? Before answering, subscribe and continue watching. Now, let me explain my personal view. I used to be someone who loved anime a lot. It was a big part of my life, similar to how you might love soccer or K-pop idols. Why do some people love anime so much? Anime shows often air for long periods. For example, One Piece has been airing for 25 years, and Naruto lasted for 10 years. Watching these shows over a long time, you see character development and positive values in these characters. They are brave, love goodness, help others, and are virtuous. Seeing these characters evolve positively over time is compelling. Just like with K-pop, where fans might be in a period of identity search and need something to connect with, anime can provide a similar sense of community and identity. Fans develop a bond with the characters and the series, creating a support network and shared experiences. In anime, if you have some sort of void in your identity, it fills that gap and introduces you to people who share your interests. This is the source of addiction and excessive love for anime. However, there is one factor that distinguishes anime from K-pop. K-pop fans' loyalty lies in following the lives of idols, watching their new concerts, listening to their new songs, and so on. Anime requires even more loyalty because you need to watch episodes, each of which lasts about 20 minutes. For example, One Piece has over 1,000 episodes. Watching all of them and keeping up with new weekly episodes means you consume a lot of content. This leads to isolation, as discussed in research papers on the effects of anime on university students. These studies show that isolation spreads among these individuals because they invest so much time. Anime is different from other interests. The anime community is huge, especially after the COVID-19 pandemic. It grew significantly in 2020 and 2021. The number of anime viewers increased by 118% because platforms like Crunchyroll, dedicated to anime, were bought by Sony, and Netflix began acquiring anime content. With people being stuck at home, it became easier for them to watch. Now, to return to the point I wanted to clarify, in a large community like the anime community, you will encounter people with strange inclinations. You will see individuals who are excessively influenced by anime and engage in unusual activities. There will be criminals who watch anime, and you might see news about anime fans involved in crimes. This does not necessarily mean that anime is to blame. It is just a byproduct of having such a large community where a variety of behaviors will emerge. In the end, my opinion on anime is that it is neither entirely positive nor entirely negative. If you watch anime, be cautious of underlying ideas. Everything in life carries hidden messages, so stay aware. Do not isolate yourself from people, make friends, go out, and engage in other activities. Watch anime if it does not negatively affect your life. If it starts affecting you, you might be entering a problematic area, so be careful.